As we look forward to a rebound here in Tampa Bay, we want to make sure that you have the resources to navigate through this tough time. And today we're talking about the road back for us and how that looks. My guest is ABC Action News anchor Paul LaGrone. And Paul makes an excellent point during this interview that maybe for the first time in our lifetimes, this is the biggest story on a worldwide, national, state, and a local level. And it changes and is different on all of them. I'm James Tully with ABC Action News, and this is the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast. Now let's talk about the road back with Paul LaGrone. Okay, Paul, we're coming off a night where you were able to host a town hall with the mayor of St. Pete and try and get some questions answered. Anything that popped out at you with what you learned or maybe you already expected to hear?
He apparently has not made a decision yet on whether or not he's going to go along with the governor's order. He had not seen it by the time we went on air with that Facebook Live town hall, and it came down actually while we were doing it, the entirety of the order, that is, when you get down to the granular details. He wanted to give it a once-over or maybe even a twice-over before he made a call, and he has to consult with city council and all of that. And the city of St. Petersburg will be in lockstep, I imagine, with Pinellas County. And I tried to pin him down. When are you going to make a decision?
Right.
But he wouldn't do that. I was kind of hoping that DeSantis would open up the barber shops, because my hair, as you can tell, is in the witness protection program at this point. It's becoming more difficult.
I think we're all in hat mode. I do like the backwards hat look on you, Paul. I'm about to go to the same direction. I'd say I'm about maybe 2 weeks away from a baby mullet. I think that's about where I am. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to avoid, actually. But I went with the hometown team, Brady the Bucks. Speaking of rebound, I hope that we can get a season off, and that would be good for the fans.
Well, I love when you and I get together in the office and we talk a little bit of sports, and I was hoping to save a little bit of time at the end of this to see what your thought is on where we are with bringing back sports in the Bay Area, at least. There are some things starting to pop out in some news outlets about potentially where we might go, where we might be seeing some of our, maybe how the NBA wraps up, the NHL wraps up, and then how the NFL even begins. But before we do that, you brought up a really good point when you talked to the St. Pete mayor. Okay, so we're in this phase one of reopening in the state of Florida from the governor. But what we're going to have is a trickle-down effect from all of that, because we're going to have all of the municipalities chime in and basically make the final call about where you live and what you're actually able to do. This is how this process is going to play out.
Well, and James, you really hit on it there, because I actually made the comment to the mayor last night, all politics is local, and perhaps all pandemics are local as well. God forbid we have another one. But the decision-making process being that no one is going to know how better to treat the reality on the ground than the local officials. And so they've been given this direction from the state, which, as you know, by now have been reporting, I'm sure, all morning, that restaurants and retail can open at 25% capacity. That's sort of the big headline. And, of course, there are other bullet points along the way on what this means.
Right. Retail shops can reopen also at limited capacity. Social distancing is going to be maintained throughout this whole process. But, right, exactly. There were some pretty big bullet points coming down from the state level.
And so that takes on some risk, right? When you're talking about weighing public safety versus the ability for people to resume not only some sense of normalcy, but let us not forget how this has economically ruined people, and how that is also a risk as well, because you have folks that are applying for unemployment, they're not getting help. The system has failed at the state level. It doesn't appear to be turning around. You're leaving people without a life jacket, and so they're out there sort of scrambling to figure out what to do. Some folks don't know how to make ends meet right now, and so how do you at those two things that intersect? How do you make a decision that is in the best interest, keeping in mind the threat that we still have out there with this virus? I don't envy a decision maker right now on any level, whether it's local, state, or national. It's just the ultimate crucible situation. It doesn't seem to be a complete right answer. There's a set of bad options, but options nonetheless, and you have to move forward. I'm trying to decide for myself if I would want to go to a restaurant at 25% capacity. I mean, that's a personal decision,
A lot of it's going to be left to up to a personal decision, and it will be interesting as the reopening phases kind of expand and we do eventually get to a phase 2 where that capacity then is lifted a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see how the public reacts to it. Of course, we want to see the economy rebound here in the Bay Area and statewide. But like you said, how many people are actually going to be willing to go out and spend money? How many people are going to have money to spend? And then what are they going to be comfortable with doing? These are all really huge questions in an unprecedented time we just don't have the answers to.
If my gut would tell me that you're going to see a lot of people want to get out, and if they have the means to do it, they will. For those of us who are fortunate enough to still have a job, people are going to want to support businesses. Of course, you can do that with takeout right now, but they've got this situation where, and this was something that wasn't crystal clear to me anyway upon the first reading, was outdoor seating. That would appear to be, didn't seem to be completely clarified on whether or not that was 25% capacity or if there could be more. But I feel like everyone's pent up right now. They're ready to get out and about, and at least in some form, whatever limitations that they have to abide by, they'll be willing to do it.
Right. So as we record this, the governor has basically given the go-ahead for phase 1 in the state of Florida. Now we're waiting on decisions coming down from the counties like Pinellas and Hillsborough. You just talked to the mayor last evening. They're not ready to make a decision yet if they're going to go along with what the governor said. It's going to be a back and forth. It's going to be a game of it's going to be a game like this pretty much throughout the entire process. It's going to be a push and pull process.
And then we get phase 2 eventually, and then phase 3. And so it's a baby step approach, as the governor was saying. It's been an interesting ride, this whole thing, because I was talking to someone, I don't recall ever in the 2 years that I've been doing this, where there's been a story that is worldwide, national, and local at the same time.
Great point.
That pervasiveness where and the story changes. I mean, on an international level, it's one story. On a national level, and then when you get down to individual cities, the pandemic, as we call it, is different from city to city. I mean, look at South Florida and the reality there versus the reality here. And you want them to come on board, as the governor said, eventually being able to have some of those restrictions lifted. But it's a densely populated area. They got hit harder than we did. And we're doing relatively, that's the key word, good right now. I really hope it stays that way.
Exactly. And you're right. You can look at the cases per capita and you see a huge difference between a place like Broward County and Hillsborough County. And that makes this process even more complicated for those of you listening out there. That's the reason why the county commissioners, the mayors, are stepping in here after the governor basically makes an order. They're going to step in and make another call, a final call for your jurisdiction. They have no other choice, Paul. I guess this is really the only way to do it.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me, I don't know if you caught this or not, but the governor, I can only imagine the pressure he's under.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's faced some criticism for how he's led, some would say, from behind on this, because he has deferred to local governments in the beginning to sort of figure out what they wanted to do. But again, with the nature of the pandemic or the outbreaks being so localized, that you could also argue that was the approach that was necessary. But he showed a side of himself that I didn't see before. He was actually emotional off the top of that announcement last night when he started talking about his newborn daughter and the fact that no one's had the chance to hold her yet. And so he's a young father. He's got, I think, 3 kids now. And so you started to see some of, perhaps on a personal level, that sort of bubble up to the surface there. And I think a lot of folks, just looking at social media and perusing from some of my friends, man, this has been a long haul. And we are seeing glimmers of hope at the end of the tunnel. But I think there's a bit of a weariness that's setting in, that people are just kind of getting a little tired. And they're looking for inspiration, they're looking for hope, and they're looking for perhaps an outlet to just say, this is what I'm feeling right now, and this is where not seeing perhaps your family for an extended period of time really can start to get at you a little bit, and that's why you have to reach out in whatever way you can, even technology like this that allows you to see people at least.
That's about all you can hold on to. I want to get your thoughts on this. When all of this started, of course, I had viewers reaching out to me, asking me my thoughts and what they should do and everything else. And the one thing I said was, well, there's one thing you can hold out for. And this is in the middle of March, I said this. And now as we close out April, which has been a pretty scary month any way you slice it, I said, look for the first lifting of restrictions as a sign of hope here. Because when everything's getting locked down and we're facing some, again, measures we've never seen before in our lifetimes, I said, look for that as a sign of hope. Does that bring you any sense of confidence, Paul, with all of your vast experience as a journalist? Was that the right thing to say to somebody? Do you feel the least bit better now that we're at least trying to start a reopening phase?
I feel like yes. I mean, I guess would be the short answer. The way I rationalize this is you have control over this. You can go out and wear a mask. You can wear gloves. You can do the social distancing. You can wash your hands. When you talk to any number of experts on that, that greatly reduces your chance of contracting the virus. There are going to be phases. But if you say you go to a store and there are people and you're wearing that protective gear, and I don't have the right answer. I'm not an expert, but I have two family members who are nurses who are exposed to this every day. They're wearing protective gear. They've been fine. You haven't heard of medical professionals, getting sick and they're exposed to it every day. Of course, I'm sure there are some obviously that have, but I'm talking about in mass numbers. And so I feel like in order for us to really fight this war, if you want to call it that, we're going to have to eventually step outside of our shells and get back into the real world and maybe take some chances. At the same time, you've got things happening on the vaccine front, on the treatment front with remdesivir and the news that's come out about that. So all the wheels are turning, and I think there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. I mean, when Fauci came on yesterday and said, this is good news, this stuff appears to be working, when Fauci says something, that tends to, and the markets have reacted to that news.
Yep. Tends to resonate. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as luck would have it, Paul, we're in an election year. And you wanted to at least touch on a lot of concerns from supervisors of elections about how this is going to go down. And This is, again, looking into the future that we there's no way for us to predict. But what's the sense you're getting from there? How do you think our election cycle is going to play out? This could be very, very different than anything we've ever seen.
It is. It will be. And I will say that they have a job. And this is a story that airs tonight at 6:00, by the way, on ABC Action News. But they have a job that can be thankless in a good year. They can. Every election there seems to be some sort of situation in Florida in particular, and I don't have to go over the history, but where some county somewhere doesn't have their act together and they're getting called out on national media about how they're messing up the election. I mean, none of those counties happen to be here. The counties here have done a pretty consistent job, but they're concerned that because they have to plan months out, they're concerned what are things going to be like in November, and even if things are in remission in terms of this virus, they need poll workers to be able to show up. So one of their big concerns is, will they have enough poll workers to work the polls? Because a lot of these workers tend to be over the age of 60, and so they're in that vulnerable population. And when they held the presidential preference primary back in March, when this thing really started the first pop, I think it was a couple of hundred across Tampa Bay. We're talking over 500 poll workers quit.
Oh, yeah.
And the day or two leading up to the election, and that kind of put them in a real bind in several different counties. So that's their big concern. The other thing they're really pushing, bottom line, mail in your vote. This is the year where the election will be decided at your mailbox. not at the polls. And if you really want to have a say in it, and if you really are concerned about, contracting anything, it's real easy. Just go to your local supervisor of elections office, go online, navigate it. They'll have it in a prominent place on their website, and you have to request the ballot. They can't just automatically send it to you like the census. So you have to request it, but they'll mail you the ballot. You fill it out. You can mail it back. They actually pay for the postage, so you just drop it right back in the mailbox or post office, or you can drop it off at one of the drop-off locations, which they'll have throughout and vastly expanded this year. So it's really easy, and it also allows for other people who have no other means to vote. Folks who perhaps are blind or have other disabilities. Sure. They have to vote in person, or maybe they're more comfortable voting in person. It frees them up to do that without having to worry about being exposed to too many people. But that's what they're dealing with right now.
Of course, a byproduct of that is that we may not have our results for our election, and we're not the only state that's going to be telling people to do this. We may be looking at a situation where it could be days, if not weeks, after Election Day that we actually have results.
I think we have to be more forgiving when it comes to maybe the media and how we cover that, because we're so accustomed to, okay, we want to call it election night. And this might be one of those years where you might need to wait a couple of days to tally up the score. It's what the things that can happen in the next 6 months. There's a lot that can change.
In honor of you wearing your Tampa Bay Buccaneers hat, I'm not ready to call them the Tampa Bay Bucks yet. We like the Tampa Brady's on the morning show. Sarah Finney came up with that. The Tampa Brady's. We just think it has a better ring to it. We want to talk about a little bit about sports and just spitball a bit. I'll throw this at you. Greg D and I had a pretty good conversation about the mobile testing units that are starting to be dispersed, getting you a coronavirus test result in about 45 minutes to an hour. This is a game changer in allowing some of these teams to play, sports to play. Think about baseball, for example. If you could get all these players tested, even if you have them in the same location, whether it's Arizona or Florida, spring training facilities, what have you, without fans, this is a real difference maker. If you can get them tested, results before they even hit the field, that's a start, right? But where do you see things going? I mean, I you know me, I'm a diehard baseball fan. I'm really hoping for something to watch on TV. I mean, Korean baseball, look, with all respect to it, I'm getting a little tired of that. I would like to get back to some Major League Baseball action, sooner than later.
I hope so, pal. I really do. I've been starving for sports. I told someone last night, I said, at this point, I'll settle for professional arm wrestling as long as it's live.
Well, you can watch ping pong, Paul. If you look hard enough online, you can find ping pong.
Kreisman actually talked about this last night. The mayor of St. Pete, he said that the rumor is that Tropicana Field would be one of the sites they're considering for playing some of those games. Right. And I know you've heard of how they want to split up the division, the league in 3 divisions. Forget American League and National League, just 3 divisions.
The idea behind that is trying to reduce travel, though, right? You're going to group all your East Coast teams, West Coast teams together. Yeah, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Would you want to watch a game, though, where there are no fans? Or at this point, is it one of those things where, okay, if we're going to do this in steps, that's a step back to normalcy, I can deal with the no fans?
Well, it's funny you brought up the no fans thing, because as an Orioles fan, back near my hometown, I remember a game without fans back in 2015 when there were some riots outside the stadium, and there was also a curfew in place. And the organization, Major League Baseball, decided that, the best way to move forward here is to make it a day game and don't let people in the gates. This actually happened. And it was one of the more bizarre viewing experiences I can remember watching sports. I mean, you can hear the players say anything, from calling out a fly out to a manager yelling at the umpire. The players said they could hear the announcers all the way down in the dugout from the press box. It was weird. At this point, I think there's an importance for our society to get back to some normalcy, but part of that is entertainment. And this, at this point, we've been starved from it for so long. I think anything is better than nothing. That's my opinion. That's where I land on it. I'll take it.
I think so. I think so. I think at first it would be like, oh boy, this is kind of weird, and then not seeing the fans. But if that's what we have to do to get a season off, I'll go. I'll watch it. I'll be there with them, and if anything, it's just good to see baseball back. But I wonder what football's going to do. Apparently, they're going to do a 5 week delay of the season starting, and this whole Brady thing.
It's been
I
so,
feel
what a weird year this has been.
that would have been a huge story, and we really haven't been able to enjoy
No,
it to its fullest potential because it's like you bought a Lamborghini and you haven't even been able to sit in the damn thing, and
I
it's
know.
it's like you can't even enjoy it. So we've been obviously busy with much more important matters, but without fans seeing Brady and Ray J, that I'm kind of still sort of got blinders on that might be a possibility, but. Either way, people are definitely going to be tuning in to watch that. It's going to be a special year. It's either going to go great for the Bucks or it's going to be a complete disaster. But as a lifelong Bucks fan, I've learned about heartbreak.
Yeah, you have. You have. I also know the feeling of heartbreak with several of the teams I cover. I was thinking about this too, driving into work the other day, just how I would not want to be a member of the Bucks front office, knowing that part of the reason they signed Brady wasn't just to win. It was to bring the team back to relevancy in the league, the primetime games, the attendance, selling tickets. Just the thought that, I mean, Paul, how far away are we from putting 60,000 people in a stadium for anything right now? I believe we're moving in the right direction, but how far away are we? The thought of
That's the wall. That's the wall. I think when we talk about these phases, phase
yes,
one, okay, restaurant 25% capacity. Phase two, movie theaters, bars, gyms, maybe. Phase three, I haven't looked that far ahead, but when you hit the wall of okay, 10,000 people want to get together, 50,000 people want to get together without a vaccine, that's where I don't know how you get past that
I don't
point.
either.
We could draw up scenarios where, okay, everyone wear a mask, everyone wear gloves, everyone's maybe space out the seating so you're at half capacity. Do temperature checks before you come into the stadium instead of like, when they go through your bag, the biggest thing before this was security checks, right?
Sure.
Terrorism. Now it's going to be temperature checks. Uh, how practical is that? I don't
I
know.
don't either. That's kind of where I land too. I just think that you're right. Before there's an effective treatment and a vaccine, that's about the time frame we're looking at. And let's be honest, I mean, that probably puts us well beyond this coming NFL season, a good
Yeah.
bit beyond it.
You got the Super Bowl. You got the Super Bowl in Tampa. Now I'm hearing that the Super Bowl would be played, but it would be played potentially without fans. And Tampa has a knack for making history when it comes to Super Bowls. I'll always remember the one in '91 with the Giants and the Bills, and not only was it a great game, but Whitney Houston sang the best national anthem probably in the history of national anthems.
Incredible.
And and really made Tampa stand out in a good way. And that was during the Gulf War, so people really needed to hear that. But if this goes down this way this year, where that is, albeit without fans, but it's some sort of Americana that is being broadcast in a different kind of way across all kind of platforms this year, the fact that it's just being played, but the fact that it might go down in history as being played in that kind of way, in some weird fashion, could be a source of pride for Tampa to pull that off. That will be really interesting to see. Because if they have a season, they're going to have a Super Bowl. And maybe the NFL is forgiving enough and says, you know what, we're going to give you guys another one the year after, a couple of years with fans, since you had to had to do it this
And
way.
you kind of wonder the same thing too onto a different version of sports entertainment. Maybe we lost WrestleMania too, and I was getting a couple of looks during some editorial meetings when I said, guys, WrestleMania in Tampa is a huge deal. There's a good chance we set the outdoor attendance record with an event like this in Raymond James Stadium because the ring's in there. There's more places to put in seating and everything else. So we lost that. That was a big hit too. So maybe the WWE decides, okay, we can't do WrestleMania here because we've already committed to, I think they're in Los Angeles next year. Maybe we can bring another very big event here for you that we can do in the stadium or something like that. You hope, I love where your head is. You hope that there is there's a way to reclaim what we lost by losing those events.
Well, they did it with the draft, right? The NFL said Vegas, you'll have another chance. That's obviously a much smaller scale.
Sure.
I do think we need another crack at it because my gut tells me we're not going to be ready for that kind of surge of people in February. I don't see it. And you know what though? But if we have something to watch, sports is back in some level. I'll take what I can get right now because I could. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I was joking to myself. It's like I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful wife. I'm happily married and in love, and I've got two wonderful kids. That's enough. But if we're talking extras, if we're talking
Yes.
dessert, sports is the ultimate bonus in life, and I'm just absolutely starving for it right now. I mean, we couldn't even play the company golf tournament at this point. We had to
I
postpone
was really
that.
looking forward to tearing that up. I mean, literally tearing the course up of that. Remember, Paul, there's ping pong. Okay, if you look hard enough, they are playing ping pong right now. And believe me, I have. No surprise, you get two sports fans together. The longest segment on this podcast is about sports. We touched on a lot of things. He's Paul LaGrone. Find him on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Send him a message if you have some questions. He is very good at what he does, and it was really an honor to have you on and get a chance for you and I to kind of spitball back and forth here in a longer form. Thanks, Paul.
And thanks for having me on, James. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Please subscribe to the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast on Apple and Stitcher, and know that at ABC Action News, once we start a rebound here in Tampa Bay, there are steps you can take to find help for your family. Visit abcactionnews.com/rebound. I'm James Tully. Thanks for listening.